Okay, so this question is, what do I need to know before I make an offer on a property? And this is a really good question. What I like to do before we actually make the offer on the property is send basically a checklist of information that we need to have, that I need to know to be able to fill out the purchase agreement on your behalf. And you're going to go through and answer those questions for me. But some basic things we're going to need to have satisfied before we even start to draw up the paperwork is, first off, how much of a loan are you approved for, and does this house fit within that range? That's going to be first and foremost. If you can't provide me as your agent with a pre-approval letter for the amount of the property, then we're going to have a hard time having someone even consider our offer. So that's going to be a first and foremost thing that you want to look at. The next thing you're going to want to do is look at the closing date that we put on the contract. We have to fill that out up front. So if you know for a fact that you're going to be on a cruise, the last week in February, we can't close that week. And those dates, once they're set and everyone is in agreement, those dates get tricky to try to move around. There's a lot that depends on those dates being secure. So you want to check your schedule. You want to make sure you're available. You want to make sure you can get off work. If we're closing on a lunch break or something like that, you just want to make sure that all those things are gonna play out and be something that you can realistically do. Another, interesting thing to think about is, if you're renting right now, what are the ramifications for you breaking your lease? When does your lease actually end? How does your agreement with your tenant work? Are they going to require you to pay your lease out until the end of the term, whether you're there or not? Are they going to require you to find your own replacement? Are they just going to charge you the full amount? Are they just going to charge you another month? There's a lot of things like that are very legitimate costs that can add up very quickly. So it's important to look at those things, take those things into consideration before we make an offer on a property. Another thing I always like to check before we do this, and not every agent does this the same way, but I find it, especially in our market, in our area, I think it's very important to go ahead and know what flood zone the property is in and how much that flood insurance is going to cost you. That is a huge determining factor in how much you're going to be able to afford, month to month. And also, it's going to play a big part in how much you're going to have to bring to the table as far as your closing costs, because you have to put typically between 12 and 14 months worth of flood insurance into escrow, and you have to bring that to closing. And that is on top of any other funds that you have to bring to closing. So I find it very important that we go ahead and know those numbers, that we have those hard numbers so that we can look at that property and factor in that information if it's a factor, and know in advance, okay, this is how much I'm expecting, and go ahead and have those things in our minds so that we know how much we're paying per month.